Hey guys, this is Brandon White from Rochester Sport Fishing. Today I'm going to do a in-depth but hopefully quick video to help you guys with late spring, mid-spring, post-spawn walleyes, whatever you guys want to call it. I do have some notes with me because it's very specific. Most of you guys know walleyes are not the easiest thing to catch, so I want to make sure I give you guys the most detailed and correct, up-to-date information I can. So I'm going to look to my notes a little bit, but again, I want to make sure that you guys are getting the best and most accurate information that I can give you. So the thing I want to talk about is here in upstate New York, the season doesn't open until the 7th of May. So we legally can't even target walleyes before that. Around this time of year, the water is anywhere from like 52 to 55 degrees, and I consider that late spring. The key when you're watching any videos on YouTube, Outdoor Channel, any of the fishing TV shows at all, pay attention to water temperature. Do not pay attention to if they're saying spawn, post-spawn, pre-spawn, spring, early summer, mid-summer. It doesn't matter, because if it doesn't directly correlate with where you live versus where they're fishing, then your results aren't going to be the same. So, you know, on the West Coast, it's going to be warmer, or south, it's going to be way warmer than it is here in New York. So early spring to them may not be early spring to us. Early spring for us, we still have ice. And early spring for them, they're already in 60-degree water. So it's key to not pay attention to how they describe it, but more importantly, pay attention to the temperature. The temperature is what's most important when it comes to walleyes, in my opinion. So with that being said, this is really going to be best for late spring, or if you want to call them post-spawn walleyes. My top lures, tactics and techniques to catch them this time of the year. Basically, I consider the transition into early summer around 57 to 60 degrees. So basically with that 55 to 57 being your variance of one either starting early or the other ending late. So again, depending on where you live is going to determine how the days line up and what type of tactics you're going to use for them. In my opinion, it takes the females about 2 full weeks to recover after they spawn, so which kind of correlates with the teen dates in May. So that's when I feel like they really start to bite. And again, that's when they start to bite. So not all of them are going to be at the same time coming into to a heavier feeding pattern. So what I've noticed, if you want to catch them on a consistent basis, you need to wait till about the end of May. So again, before that, you're gonna be able to catch them, but not on as many as you are going to in the end of May. And just keep in mind that the males are pretty much going to be feeding the whole time, so it's going to be a lot easier to catch the males throughout the month of May than it is to be able to catch the females. The females are really going to start biting the last week in June, the last week in May going into the first week of June. Typically I find that the afternoons are better because they wait till the water warms up, and then that's when they really start to hit. So now we're going to discuss my top baits depending on the body of water structure that you're fishing. So I'm going to give you some tips for casting tapering flats or casting drop-offs, depending on what type of structure your body of water has. No matter what, the walleyes always want to have like a safety valve, so meaning they want to be close to deep water if they feel like they need to get out of there. They are the most, even though they are a top-of-the-line predator, they are very sensitive to boat traffic, noise, water disturbance, things like that. A huge tip with no matter what I'm showing you today is that you need to take into consideration the size of the body of water that you're fishing and the size of the fish that typically come out of your body of water. So if you typically have smaller walleyes, no matter what, you're going to want to downsize slightly. If you typically have larger walleyes on a normal basis, you're going to want to increase your size slightly. And that's going to go like, so if you're fishing Lake Erie where 5 pounds is common, then you're going to want to up the size of your bait a little bit. If you're fishing in an area where, you know, you're catching consistently like 13 to 17 inch fish, then you're going to want to decrease your size a little bit. So first off, we'll start with casting tapering flats. So this is like rock, sand, sparse weeds, stuff like that. I suggest starting in 10 to 15 feet of water as your medium. If it's sunny or clear water, you're going to want to move slightly deeper. If it's cloudy or dirty water, you're going to want to move slightly shallower. These presentations will work right through the midsummer. So when I create a video on your summer tactics, some of these will still hold true to the beginning and mid-summer. So first I'm going to talk about stick baits, and it's important to have a nice selection of both rattling and balsa baits, because again, walleyes are finicky, and you're going to want to be able to try both to see what is going to work, because it's that much as sometimes they just don't want the rattles. So preferably I like suspending baits this time of year only, but floating baits will also work. The key is you want to have a bait with a tight wobble to it. Anything wide wobble, anything really abrasive is going to just not draw their attention, or it's just going to spook them away, specifically this time of the year. You want something that you can like use like a twitch pause method with. I like the either suspending or the floating Rogue to start off with. So they pretty much are identical. One of these is suspending and one of them is not. My favorite color is the blue chrome top, regular chrome middle, and the orange belly. The only way you're gonna be able to know if these are suspending or not is you probably can't even see it, but on the lip there it's gonna say suspending. These guys are awesome. Again, but make sure they're not too big for your body of water. If they are, you're gonna want to shorten something down to like maybe a 3.5 or 4 inch. These are usually run about 5 to 5.5 inches. Some other baits that'll work great, and this gives you a good option for what I was just talking about, is the Yozuris, either the smalls or the mediums, so either the 3.5s or the 4 3/8. So this is where if you were in a smaller body of water, something like this 3.5 inch Yozuri right here, a crystal minnow, will work great. If you're in a little bit bigger one, use something like this 4 3/8 Yozuri here. The awesome thing about Yozuri is that they offer every single one of their crystal minnows in floating, suspending, and sinking. So you can buy whatever it is that you want. I specifically have floating in mine. And obviously, if you want to go with something balsa style, you're going to almost have to stick with Rapala. There's only a couple other companies, and I probably couldn't even name off the top of my head, that still make balsa baits. Maybe like Bagley, I know is balsa. There's a couple other companies that are. So you're going to have to stick with very few companies, but it is good to have a selection. If you watch any of my other videos, you know how much I hate 3 treble hooked baits. So basically like the Rogue or like the Rapala. The reason I hate them is because they typically have 3 smaller hooks versus 2 larger hooks. What typically happens is this front hook ends up wrapping around the front of the bill, is going to ruin some of your cast. Sometimes even the companies aren't smart enough to make it so that their hooks don't catch on each other. So a lot of times the hooks will catch on each other. This is the only time of the year that I do like them, because you're going to get a lot of walleyes that are nipping at the baits, what we call it. And so having those smaller treble hooks is actually going to increase your hookup ratio. So this is the one time of year where not having large hooks is actually beneficial, and having those 3 separate hooks is going to be beneficial to you. Next, we will go into the wobble bobber, which is my favorite style of bobber. So I'm going to show you real quick here, and I just made one up, but I cut it off so it'd be easy to show you guys. So basically, the cool thing about the wobble bobber is that even if it isn't windy, if it's a dead calm day, the bobber is just going to float back and forth on top of the water, just of how the buoyancy is considered, or how the buoyancy is created inside this bobber. It also has brass grommets, so your line's going to be able to flow through easier, and you're not going to have any points where it stops or gets caught up or ends up snapping your line. So basically what I do is I put this little line tie that comes with, you can just buy these anywhere, these are just little stoppers or line ties. And then I put a bead so that the line tie does not flow through the wobble bobber here. At the bottom, I like to put a egg sinker, and then I put another bead to protect the knot on my clip here. And then what I use is I usually use like a 6 or an 8 foot leader with just a single hook, usually size 2, with either a minnow or a leech on it, depending on what the temperature is in your water. Typically people like to use minnows earlier in the year, but the one thing I do like about leeches, if you can find them that early in the year, is they just put off so much action. Them just hanging there, just slithering back and forth, is a huge attractant for walleyes. The other cool thing about the wobble bobbers versus anybody else is they actually, on each of their bobbers, they have a different weight. So you can match up the weight of the bobber with the sinker, and you can actually cast the heavier ones farther. So as the bobber gets bigger, that's also going to increase in weight, so you can be able to cast them a heck of a lot farther than anything else. So see if there's anything else I want to say about that. Oh, the cool thing about the wobble bobber is it allows you to show two presentations. So if it's legal where you are and you can use more than one pole per person, I like to cast the wobble bobber out, and then this gives me an opportunity to get another pole, throw a jig out there, throw a stick bait out there, and this really helps you narrow down what you need to use that time of the year and really get on the pattern for whatever it is that particular day, whether it's stick baits, whether it's live bait, whether it's jigs, whatever it may be. You can get on it quicker because you can show them more than one presentation at once. So that's a cool thing about that. But again, make sure your rules allow you to do that. They allow you up to 3 poles in New York, but I know when I cross the border and I go fish in Canada, you're only allowed 1 pole per person if you're on an inland lake. Next, we'll go to a jig tip with a minnow, which is really basic. But the key with this is you want a short shank. So like I was talking about before, they're going to nip at the baits. This is why you need a short shank. The longer shank is going to present a larger image to them, and they might deter them a little bit, but it's also going to decrease your hookup ratios, in my opinion. So to show you what I'm talking about is I typically like to use a bucktail jig if I'm going to tip it with a minnow, as a nice short shank there, so that the minnow's right here, so it's not much past the end of the skirt here, versus like a big shank like this moon eye here. You have such a big shank here. I mean, the minnow's going to be way down here. Next thing you know, you're showing like a 5-inch presentation when you're really trying to, with minnows, you know, you're a little bit more finesse, a little bit more of a slow presentation. Here's another one. This is just a real basic jig head, but it's just such a big shank, and I do not like them this time of the year. I like the presentation just to be more compact. Again, you don't have to use a bucktail. It puts off a little bit more color, maybe a little bit more flash. And they typically always have a shorter shank. So if I hold these up real quick next to each other, you can see the difference here in them. So let's see. Also, the one I do like to use is this New Tech small finesse jig. Cool thing about this, I know it is a little bit bigger presentation, but it has the skirt on it. So either using this is what they call a buzz cut skirt, so it's actually cut down a little bit smaller than a normal skirt that's on like a bass style jig. So with that, what's cool is it's a smaller presentation, just gives you the option whether you want to use hair or whether you want to use plastic. One cool thing about their jigs is that they come with a rattle holder on the back of the collar. So, you know, just changing it up, sometimes it's just really slight things that'll work. And you can throw a rattle in there and just give a little bit extra noise to the presentation. Okay, so now let's transition into drop-offs. You can fish these 2 ways. What I typically like to do is I either start deep, cast in shallow, and then I'll switch it around and I'll go in shallow and cast deep. So with that being said, I suggest obviously fishing deep, casting shallow to begin with, so that you're not spooking the fish in case they are shallow. They're still looking for warm water this time of year, which is key. So they're going to be shallow, or they're going to be suspended in deep water close to shallow. They're not going to be on the bottom. If you're casting from deep into shallow, I use the stick bait suggestions that I used before. Those suspending rogues that dive like 5 to 6 feet. Same thing with the Yozuris, they dive like 4 to 5 feet. And you're casting them into the shallows, and then you're bringing them right over that drop off, and sometimes they'll come up and they'll grab them. That's a great presentation for this time of year. Now on the reverse side, if you're starting in shallow and you're casting in deep water, remember that they're probably going to be suspended. I've also had good luck with some smaller style baits. So even though they are typically known as bass lures, I've had really good luck with these little bombers here. So I'll be in shallow and I'll be casting them into deep water and bringing them up. I have great luck with that. You can also use like a little vicious crankbait. They're about the same size. Rattle traps are great, or lipless crankbaits, but the one key thing, and I've noticed just there's a huge differentiation between the amount of noise that rattle traps put off. So I like to find one for early in the year that's less abrasive, so there's less rattles, the rattles aren't as loud. So like if you listen, this Yo-Zuri just has just a few rattles in it, and it's not very abrasive. If you go over to this Strike King, you can hear how it's way more abrasive. So what I'm talking about is if you ever cast it out, a lipless crankbait, and you're bringing it back and you can actually hear the rattles about 50 yards away, that's a loud rattle, and I typically won't use that early in the year. Yo-Zuri actually makes two different kinds of lipless cranks. This is the 3D Vibe, which has the softer rattles in my opinion, so you can hear those, but they also make this one, which is called the Rattlin' Vibe, and as you can see, it's got way more rattles in it, so I will not use that early in the year. Another one that I've had success with is the Flicker Shad, the size 7. Those also work great, casting from shallow into deep. I would suggest being in the lipped lures that I just showed you typically dive about 6 to 10 feet. So if you have anything in that range that dives that depth, that will work great. Again, jig with plastic, you can either use it with a skirt, without a skirt. Boot tails work great, grubs work great, tube jigs work great. But again, same as I mentioned before, you want to match the size of the bait with the size of the walleyes that you're fishing for. So don't use a huge 5-inch boot tail. If the walleyes are small, you might want to narrow it down to maybe a 3 or 3.5 inch boot tail. But the key thing with boot tails is you need to check out the size of the diameter of the top of the head of the boot tail, because sometimes they'll be so thin that you have to use a tiny jig head to get it in there, and then you're going to decrease your hookup ratio, or you're going to be just using such a small jig, you're going to miss a lot of hits there. Basically with that, for before too, you want to use the lightest jig head you can with still being able to feel the bottom. So if that makes sense. So typically I start off with like an 1/8 ounce and I work my way up. If it's windier, if it's deeper, whatever it may be, you just use whatever, the lightest you can so that you can feel the bottom. That goes back to when I was talking about the minnows too. If I'm casting from shallow water into deep water, I'll typically use a slightly heavier jig, just because it's going to be able to get down to the strike zone a little bit quicker. I'm not so much worried about the fall rate like it is if you were bass fishing. And you're going to be able to get more casts because it's falling into that strike zone quicker. Again, with the jigs, with the Nutex or any of these other ones, if you had a collar that has a little place for a rattle on it, you can really quickly switch it up, add a rattle to it, and just see if that changes anything. I think the best baits this time of the year are typically around the 3.5 inch to 4 inch range. So anything around that I think is the best go-to. You can still use live bait, as I talked about, on the tapering flats, but the only problem that I've noticed is that whether I'm throwing it shallow, bringing it down a drop-off, or vice versa, shallow going over a drop-off, is that I lose a ton of minnows dragging them up or down drop-offs. They just catch on so much stuff. When you're casting the flats, they're usually sand, small rocks, stuff like that. You don't have too many issues with the minnow coming off, but I lose so many minnows when I'm casting drop-offs that sometimes I won't do it because of that specifically. And last, you can troll this time of year, but you gotta remember, if the walleyes are shallower, it's going to be an area where they're more spooky. So keep an eye out for that. So I would suggest using planer board. So have one planer board going shallow. Have, if you're running 4 lines, try to have a planer board going in real shallow. And then you have your 2 middle lines that are coming right off the boat, and then a deep planer board, so you're catching both sides of the shallow end of the drop-off and the deep end of the drop-off. Or if you're on a tapering flat, then you're just using an array of baits and just try to cover the different areas. So if you're in 10 foot of water, try to cover a shallow bait with 4 foot, and then on your deep one have a 10 foot diving bait, so you're pretty close to the bottom. So if they're suspended or if they're right on the bottom, whatever it may be, you'll have a better bet of catching them or figuring out which lures you need to change all your lines to. If you're going to troll, I usually wait till about 57 to 60 degrees, so anytime before that, it's going to be a little bit harder to troll and catch them. The one bait that I've been having a lot of success with this year, and you'll see in some of my other videos, is this 5/0 New Tech Elite jig. I cut the weed guards off, and I've been using a 3.8-inch boot tail, either Kitech Fat Impact or the Speed Shad by Bass Pro. They've just been, I don't know why, they just love it. The action that it puts off is just a walleye magnet. So I hope this has helped you guys out a little bit. I'm going to try to continue to do videos as the seasons come along. I know this one's a little bit late in the season, but I've just been fishing so much that I haven't had time to do them. So I hope this helped you guys out a little bit. If you have any questions, comments, feel free to leave them below, and I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. And I'll be trying to put out videos for you guys. I'm also going to do some night videos. So I'm going to do night videos on spring, summer, fall, along with the daytime videos. And I'll be putting out a ton of nighttime footage because the late spring, early summer is, my opinion, the best time to catch walleyes at night because they're coming into the shallows, feeding heavily on cornered bait fish, and we just catch tons of them at night. And there's usually nobody out there, so you're by yourself catching fish, and you're just having a good time without having to worry about any other boats around. It's quiet, and it's just a nice, peaceful time, and it's a fun time. So thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe, like, and yeah, if you have any videos you want me to do, suggestions, things you want to know, don't hesitate to ask. Thanks. Have a good one.